Deep in the shadowy heart of the Appalachian Mountains, where the wind whispers secrets and the trees guard untold mysteries, a chilling sound has haunted generations. But one December evening, a recording captured something beyond explanation. What this woman heard may change how you think about the wilderness forever. Are you ready to step into the unknown? On a cold December night in Bluefield, West Virginia, Samantha Keller stood by her kitchen sink, gazing out at the dark forest behind her home. The towering peaks of Mercer County framed her view, their rugged slopes vanishing into the endless horizon. She had always felt a deep connection to these mountains. Her hunting trips and countless hours in the wild had taught her to respect its secrets. But that night, the mountains gave her something she couldn't explain. It began as a faint, mournful howl carried on the crisp evening air. At first, she brushed it off as the wind twisting through the valleys, but the sound grew deeper, more resonant. It seemed to linger, pressing against the quiet until her hands froze mid-motion, dishcloth clenched tight.
This was no wind. It wasn't a coyote, a fox, or even an owl. She'd heard every predator's call in these woods, but this was something else. Something alive. Jake, you need to hear this.
What's going on?
Do you hear it?
Oh, I hear it.
At that moment, Samantha couldn't help but wonder, what would you do if you heard something so unnatural, so alien, echoing through your backyard? Would you go out to investigate, or would you stay frozen, hoping it doesn't find you first? As the days passed, she noticed a pattern. The chilling sounds would begin every evening between 8:45 and 9:15 p.m., only to fade away and return again around 11 p.m. to midnight. And they weren't a one-time event. This phenomenon repeated night after night. Samantha began stepping out onto her back porch, braving the biting cold of the mountain air. The darkness around her seemed alive, heavy with anticipation. Each time the howls echoed through the forest, they came from a different direction. Some nights they rose from deep in the valley. Other times they floated down from the ridgeline above her property. But no matter where they originated, one thing was clear. These were not ordinary sounds. The howls were unnervingly long, starting as low vibrations before climbing to an agonizing, high-pitched crescendo that made her skin crawl. It wasn't just fear. This was something primal, something her instincts screamed to avoid. This time, she didn't just hear them, she felt them. The sound was so intense it seemed to vibrate through the air, resonating in her chest like the deep rumble of a passing train. She gripped the wooden railing of her porch, her knuckles white, as the hair on the back of her neck stood on end.
What is this?
And then I have to ask you, if you were standing there in her place, hearing something so unearthly, would you run? Or would you stay and face the darkness, hoping to uncover the truth?
Whatever it was, Samantha knew one thing. It wasn't leaving anytime soon, and maybe, just maybe, it was waiting for her. Imagine stepping into the woods you've known your entire life, only to find them suddenly transformed, branches arranged in eerie patterns, silence where wildlife once thrived, and howls that rattle your chest. What would you do if the forest itself seemed to push back? One cold December evening, Samantha Keller stood on her back porch, frozen in place. The deep, mournful howls had returned, louder than ever. The vibrations echoed through her chest like the bass from a massive speaker. Suddenly, her motion-activated security lights flickered on, illuminating her backyard. The yard was empty, but the woods beyond remained shrouded in darkness, and Samantha could feel the howls coming from somewhere deep within. Straining her eyes against the black void, she saw nothing, yet the sounds continued, unrelenting, gnawing at her nerves. A few days later, when the weather warmed up, Samantha and her husband decided to check on their deer stands and feeders. As they walked the familiar trails, they stumbled upon something unnerving. Tree branches arranged in deliberate, unnatural formations. Samantha, an experienced hunter who knew these woods like the back of her hand, immediately recognized this wasn't the work of an animal. It was too deliberate, too calculated. The odd arrangements reminded her of similar patterns she'd noticed the year before but had dismissed at the time. But now, with the haunting howls echoing nightly, those patterns took on a sinister new meaning. As the pieces clicked into place, other strange occurrences came to mind. Her deer cameras, once bustling with wildlife activity, had stopped picking up the usual animals. The woods had gone eerily silent. Coyotes, owls, and other nighttime sounds had faded into a deafening stillness. Some nights it felt like the entire forest was holding its breath. And then there were the tracks, massive, deep impressions in the mud near her feeders. The mud distorted them just enough to make them unidentifiable, but they were too large to belong to any known predator in the area. Oddly, her feeders were often completely cleaned out, despite the cameras capturing no activity. The breaking point came one afternoon as she walked the trail behind her property. The recent rains had softened the ground and her boots sank into the mud as she moved. About a quarter-mile in, she stopped dead in her tracks. A massive tree had been dragged across the path, blocking it entirely. There hadn't been any recent storms and the tree showed no signs of natural damage. No lightning scars, no rotting trunk. It hadn't fallen. It had been bent like a horseshoe, its top tucked impossibly high under another tree, a good 9 feet off the ground. Samantha stood there, craning her neck to take it all in. At 5 feet 4 inches, she could barely comprehend the strength it would take to manipulate something so massive. Even a team of men would have struggled to drag and bend a tree this size. In all her years, she had never seen anything like it. Trees fall naturally, split by lightning, toppled by storms or age. But this was something else entirely, something out of a nightmare. As Samantha turned back toward her house, the forest seemed heavier, as if it were watching her every step. Whatever had done this wasn't just strong, it was deliberate. And now I have to ask you, if you were standing in that forest, surrounded by silence and strange signs, would you keep walking, or would you run before it's too late? The forest held its secrets, but Samantha couldn't shake the feeling that something was trying to send a message, something she might not want to understand. Deep in the Appalachian wilderness, where the mountains have kept their secrets for centuries, a woman captured chilling sounds that defied logic and baffled wildlife experts. What she recorded may be the key to understanding a mystery older than time itself, or a warning to stay far away. Would you dare listen? Determined to uncover the truth, Samantha Keller shared her recordings with wildlife researchers. Their verdict? Utter bewilderment. Whatever was making these sounds had to be enormous. Its sheer volume and depth pointed to something far larger than any known animal. And yet no one could identify it. The howls didn't match the calls of coyotes, wolves, or any other wildlife known to roam the Appalachian Mountains. Refusing to back down, Samantha began carrying her recorder everywhere. On some nights, the howls seemed impossibly close, echoing so clearly that she could feel the vibrations in her chest. Other times, they faded into the distance, carried away by the wind. Even with her meticulous documentation, the mystery remained unsolved. To this day, no one has been able to provide a plausible explanation for the screams that haunted the mountains of Mercer County, or the bizarre tree arrangements scattered throughout the woods. It's just another unsolved enigma in a region steeped in folklore, where the past and the unknown collide in ways that defy logic. The Appalachian Mountains keep their secrets well, and this one might never be revealed. Now let me ask you, if you heard those unearthly screams, would you keep exploring, or would you turn back before the forest claimed another secret?
But exploring the wilderness, especially the creepy parts, doesn't have to be all terror and mystery. That's where my trusty Raycon everyday earbuds come in. When I'm venturing into the darkest corners of the woods, I rely on Raycon's active noise cancellation to drown out unsettling sounds, like, eerie howls that chill you to the bone. With their weatherproof design and incredible 32-hour battery life, I can focus on my favorite ambient tracks or true crime podcasts, no matter what the forest throws at me. And here's a bonus. The awareness mode lets me stay tuned into my surroundings when it really matters. So, while I might be listening to music, I'm still ready to run if something truly unexplainable comes creeping out of the trees. If you're planning on braving the wilderness or just want a reliable pair of earbuds for everyday use, check out Raycon. Trust me, it's a game changer, whether you're tackling ancient mysteries or just tuning out the world. Ready to venture into the unknown? Take your earbuds and go explore. Just don't forget to look over your shoulder. You never know what might be watching. Dale Stelling, a 51-year-old man, stood in the parking lot of Mesa Verde National Park on a warm June day in 2013, gazing up at the awe-inspiring cliff dwelling known as Spruce Tree House. His wife, Deneen, and his parents stood nearby as he mentioned his plan to check out the site up close. The trail to Spruce Tree House was short, a mere quarter-mile, and when Deneen offered him water, Dale waved her off with a laugh.
"I'll be fine,"
he said, turning toward the trail. But what no one knew at that moment was that Dale wasn't heading towards Spruce Tree House at all. Instead, he veered onto the much longer and more rugged Petroglyph Point Trail. This decision, seemingly innocuous at the time, would spark a mystery that remains unsolved to this day. An hour later, around 5 p.m., a retired judge and his family hiking the same trail encountered Dale near a section called the Petroglyph Panel, about 1.4 miles from the trailhead. Dale seemed anxious, telling them he needed to hurry back because people were waiting for him. That brief exchange would be the last time anyone saw Dale alive. By 7:20 p.m., Dale's wife and parents were growing concerned. Hikers were returning from their excursions without any trouble, but Dale was nowhere to be found. Alarmed, they reported him missing, and park rangers quickly began a search. The following day, the search intensified. 60 searchers, 2 dog teams, and a helicopter scoured the area, with rope teams grappling along the cliffs in hopes of finding any trace of Dale. At 7 p.m., Dale's phone made one final attempt to ping his voicemail, then silence. During the search, a hiker named Jod Peterson. In 2013, a man named Adam Thornton disappeared under baffling circumstances while hiking in Mesa Verde National Park. What began as a typical visit to the park turned into a mystery that would puzzle investigators for years. Adam was known for being directionally challenged, a fact his family often teased him about. Despite this, he decided to venture off on a hike, leaving his wife and parents near the Spruce Tree House trailhead. While the family expected him to return shortly, Adam diverted onto the more challenging Petroglyph Point Trail without telling anyone. Later that afternoon, another hiking group encountered Adam on the trail. He seemed flustered, muttering about needing to hurry back because people were waiting for him. It was the last time anyone saw him alive. A massive search effort was launched after Adam failed to return. Search dogs picked up faint trails, and at one point a hiker reported hearing distant cries for help. But despite 2 weeks of intensive searching with helicopters, ground teams and dogs, there was no sign of Adam. The case went cold until 7 years later in 2020, when police received an anonymous tip that led them to Adam's remains in a remote, restricted section of the park, an area 4.2 miles from where he was last seen. Alongside his remains were his driver's license, credit cards and social security card. The discovery only deepened the mystery. The medical examiner found no signs of trauma or animal attack, and the cause of death was listed as natural causes. Yet how Adam ended up in such an isolated and off-limits area remains unexplained. Strangely, this location had been searched back in 2013 without any findings. Mesa Verde is a harsh and expansive landscape of canyons, forests and ancient ruins, an unforgiving place where one wrong turn can lead to disaster. But the weather conditions during Adam's disappearance had been ideal for tracking, with dry ground and perfect visibility. Searchers should have found him. Adding another layer of intrigue, one of the dog handlers during the initial search commented on the park's peculiar nature, saying, "Sometimes people end up in places that just don't make any sense." Those words seemed prophetic, as Adam was found miles from where logic dictated he would have been. Then there's the anonymous tip. Someone knew where Adam's remains were. How did they know? And why did it take 7 years for them to come forward? Here's the big question. Do you think Adam's disappearance was simply a tragic accident, or is there more to the story that remains hidden in the canyons of Mesa Verde? Adam Thornton's disappearance remains one of the strangest mysteries ever to unfold in Mesa Verde National Park. It was a warm summer day when Adam, a man in his mid-50s, ventured out for what should have been a quick hike to the famous Spruce Tree House. His family waited at the trailhead, expecting him to return within the hour, but Adam had other plans. Instead of sticking to the short trail, he veered off onto the Petroglyph Point Trail. Unannounced and ill-prepared, without water or proper supplies. That was Adam, though, spontaneous and a little directionally challenged. Later that afternoon, another group of hikers encountered Adam about 1.4 miles down the rugged trail. He seemed hurried, mumbling about needing to get back because his family was waiting. He thanked them politely and walked on. That was the last time anyone saw him alive. When Adam didn't return by sundown, his wife grew concerned. Park rangers quickly initiated a search, and soon, dozens of professional searchers, dog teams, and even helicopters joined the effort. For 2 weeks, they scoured the park's rugged terrain, covering every trail, ravine, and canyon. A hiker even reported hearing faint cries for help, but the search dogs failed to track Adam's trail. Then the case went cold. 7 years later, in 2020, a chilling twist emerged. Authorities received an anonymous tip that led them to Adam's remains in a remote, restricted section of the park, 4.2 miles from where he was last seen. The area was off limits to the public and so treacherous that even rangers required special permission to enter. When Adam's remains were found, his personal belongings, ID, credit cards, and even his social security card were intact. Yet, there were no signs of trauma or animal attack. The cause of death was ruled natural causes, but the discovery raised more questions than answers. How had Adam, a man with a history of getting lost and limited mobility due to prior back surgeries, managed to traverse such dangerous terrain in 90-degree heat without water? Adding to the mystery, the exact location of his remains has never been publicly disclosed. The Park Service implemented new security protocols and surveillance measures shortly after Adam's case, but officials have never explained why. And then there's the anonymous tip. Who provided it? A rogue hiker, a park employee, someone who knew more than they let on? Why had they waited 7 years to come forward? Even stranger is what one of the dog handlers remarked during the initial search. Sometimes people in Mesa Verde end up in places that make no sense. Adam's case seemed to embody this eerie phenomenon. Mesa Verde's vast canyons and dense forests are as unforgiving as they are beautiful. For Adam Thornton, they became the stage for an enduring enigma. Here's the real question. Could this have been an accident? Or is there something about Mesa Verde that we still don't understand? In the summer of 1923, a 10-year-old boy named Charlie Morgan was up early, leading his family's horses through a misty pasture in the quiet town of Mount Airy, Illinois. The air was cool, the grass still wet with dew, and the only sounds were the soft rustling of leaves and the occasional snort from the horses. It was a peaceful routine Charlie knew by heart until that morning when everything changed. As Charlie guided the horses, he noticed something unusual in the distance, bright flickering lights cutting through the early haze. At first he thought it might be sunlight reflecting off a piece of equipment left in the field. But as he got closer, he realized it wasn't farm machinery at all. Standing about 50 feet away was a massive metallic object unlike anything Charlie had ever seen. It shimmered faintly, its surface smooth and seamless, with a large dome on top. The craft stood on 3 spindly legs, balancing as if weightless. Charlie's heart raced. Surrounding the strange craft were 5 figures. At first, Charlie thought they were children because of their short stature, but a closer look sent chills down his spine. These weren't children, or humans at all. The beings were strikingly pale, their skin almost glowing in the early morning light. Their movements were fluid and deliberate, as though they were performing some precise task. They had white blonde hair and oversized eyes that seemed to absorb everything around them. Charlie watched in stunned silence, unable to take his eyes off the scene. One of the beings sat in what looked like a floating chair, clearly in charge. The others worked feverishly, their hands moving with impossible precision. The sounds they made were unlike anything Charlie had ever heard. Melodic tones that rose and fell in a way that didn't seem like any language he knew. And yet somehow Charlie felt he could understand snippets of what they were saying. Words like stabilizers and atmospheric pressure echoed in his mind.
Charlie's curiosity outweighed his fear. He edged closer, the horses trailing behind him. But then, as if sensing his presence, the leader in the floating chair turned sharply, locking its enormous, glowing eyes directly on him. In an instant, everything changed. The beings froze mid-motion. Then, without a word, they moved swiftly back to the craft. The legs of the craft retracted, and with a faint hum, it lifted off the ground. The lights pulsed brighter for a moment before the craft shot into the sky at an impossible speed, disappearing over the horizon in a blink. Charlie stood frozen, his legs like lead. The horses remained eerily calm, grazing as though nothing extraordinary had happened. When he finally regained control of his body, Charlie crept toward the spot where the craft had been. The grass was flattened in a perfect circle, radiating warmth to the touch. The air smelled sharp and electric, like the aftermath of a lightning strike. For years, Charlie shared his story, though most dismissed it as a child's overactive imagination. After all, this was decades before the term UFO even existed. But over time, his description of the beings, short, pale, with blonde hair and oversized eyes, would eerily align with countless other encounters reported in the decades that followed. To this day, Charlie's account stands as one of the earliest recorded UFO sightings in the United States. It begs the question, was he just a small-town boy with a big imagination? Or did he truly witness something not of this world? What do you think? Drop your thoughts below, and if you've ever had your own brush with the unexplained, share your story. We're listening. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more deep dives into the fake or true ghost channel.